JJ the CPA here. Hope you're doing well. How do you get prepared for getting your tax documents to your tax professional, EA, CPA? Let me just start by reminding you respectfully that it's your tax return. The IRS, the state governments will only hold you responsible for your tax return and what is reported on it. Yes, having a professional prepare your tax return helps ensure that it gets prepared properly. One of the things you'd want to do is look up your preparer's PTIN. That's a preparer tax ID number, tax identification number, PTIN. If you just put in tax preparer PTIN or search PTIN, make sure that your tax professional has a PTIN. Doesn't mean they're any good, doesn't mean they did anything to earn it, but a PTIN indicates that they are registered with the Internal Revenue Service, and the Internal Revenue Service knows that they're preparing returns. That's it. There is no qualifications to get a PTIN, so do not be basically fooled by thinking, well, my preparer has a PTIN. Think of it as, well, if my preparer has a PTIN, they're most likely not somebody who's been committing crimes or preparing tax returns from a criminal standpoint. That's all that's really going to tell you, but at the same time, wouldn't you want to make sure of that? But when I say it's your tax return, what I mean by that, and one of the things when I was taking on clients, I've been taking on new clients since the end of 2018, but in my early career, I've had my own practice now just about 24 years, and I was bringing on everybody, just trying to put food on the table. One of the things that I tried to do every single time was go through a checklist with my clients, and a checklist of just asking a series of questions. Yes, also digging for ensuring that we were taking all the deductions that were possible, but also ensuring that a baby wasn't born, they didn't have a second job, a side gig, did you get unemployment, those kind of things that sometimes, quite frankly, it's easy to forget, right? A tax return's covering a whole year, and when we're in February or March or April of the following year, sometimes it's hard to remember back all the way to the prior year. So I would go through that checklist, and I will tell you this, those that were not interested in going through the checklist, I didn't prepare their return. Now I'm in a good circumstance where I know my clients, but guess what? I still go over the tax return, ask a series of questions, and I also send a questionnaire, not just a organizer that says, send me these pieces of documents that you had last year, but a general checklist helps jog everybody's memory, and a quick questionnaire brings out some of the obviouses. But you want to ensure that your tax professional not just has all your tax documents, okay? That doesn't really mean anything, because what if one of those tax documents got lost in the mail? What if somehow they had your wrong address? I could go through countless circumstances where if you're simply relying on, well, I gave them all my envelopes that were marked important tax documents, that doesn't really mean anything. And your defense to the IRS or governmental agency of, well, I gave them everything, is not a defense. Quite frankly, even saying, well, I hired a professional, I was relying on them, is not a defense. If there is a tax adjustment, you are 100% responsible for the tax adjustment, meaning any taxes that are due, including penalties or interest. Believe it or not, the IRS will not go after the preparer for penalties and interest or tax on your tax return. Now, they may go after the preparer for penalties, but that is extremely rare, because the tax preparer is given pretty wide latitude to rely on you, and that you gave them everything that they would need. So when you're then providing your tax documents, what else can you do? Well, first of all, I do want to remind you that the tax return is written in English. Most would be able to read it and identify what was on their prior year tax return. Those that say, well, I don't know anything about this and it overwhelms me, then ask your professional to go through it with you, or just for a moment realize that it's nothing to be afraid of. It's something that you can interpret, you can understand, because by golly, it's your tax return, meaning it's your tax documents. It's what you are reporting to the government. So you need to step it up a little bit, in my opinion, and not just throw your hands up or just assume, well, I got somebody that's really good, or, well, they know me and they know where all the skeletons are buried. No, they don't. People don't know where skeletons are buried based on you giving them 1099s and W-2s. A tax preparer, a tax professional, a EA, a CPA is only going to know what it is you tell them, what it is that you provide them. So if all you do is send them 3, 4, 5 envelopes that you haven't even opened, or even if you have opened them, how good is that tax return going to be? It's only going to be as good as the documents that you provided, and based on the professional, most of them with good software are going to be able to prepare a return of some kind based on the documents that you gave them. What you want to do is look at the last year's tax return, and believe it or not, you're going to be able to gather quite a bit of information on there by just taking a deep breath and reading it. And what I mean by reading it is, yeah, I get it. You may not know where that number came from or how that calculation was done, but that's because a computer probably did it. That's because you're looking at a summary. But when you look at Form 1040, there's words on it like wages and interest and dividends and capital gains and retirement and Social Security. Right now, you know what all those mean. The other aspect is that when you are then looking at the Form 1040, it always tells you where else to go look for that information. A Form 1040 is just simply a summary. When you look into the details of your tax return, it is going to tell you right on the 1040 what schedule to look for. You don't even have to know the schedule. You don't even have to look for that, because if you'll just go beyond the first or second page, you're then going to see things in order: a Schedule A, a Schedule B, a Schedule C, a D, a E, and a F. They go in that order, and then form numbers go in the form number. And now if all of a sudden you're throwing your hands up, you shouldn't, because the other thing is all those forms are also written in English with words that you're going to understand. For example, when you go to a Schedule A, you don't even have to know what that is. If you have a Schedule A, you're going to know it, because you're going to flip, and about the third or fourth page, you're going to come across a Schedule A. That means you itemize your deductions, and you're going to see words like real estate taxes, state taxes, mortgage interest, charitable contributions. Did you have those things? Are you providing it? Go to the next page. Oh, it's going to be a Schedule B if you have things like, and written in English, interest and dividends. Oh, that's right, I've got investments. I need to provide those documents. Then you would go to a Schedule C, which is if you're a sole proprietor or have a side business. Then you go to Schedule D, which is capital gains, and you're going to see words like stock or stock sale or gross proceeds. Then you're going to go to Schedule E, and you're going to say, oh, that's where rent is, and you're going to see income and expenses. Then you're going to go to Schedule F, and that's where farming is. So when you're then just going through your tax return, in moments, you're going to be able to look and go, oh yeah, last year I had this, I had that. I want to make sure that they have it. Giving envelopes, even if you have opened them with tax documents, doesn't mean anything other than you checked your mail and you feel as though you've astutely given that mail to your preparer. When you're dealing with a preparer and you say, well, do you think you got everything? You are assuming, and it may be true, that the preparer then prepared the return in the prior year, or has the prior year tax return and compared it. We always do compare. Our software has a nice comparison to it. And what you want to look at is last year's tax return and think through the documents that you would need to provide related to that. And if you don't know, then you ask. And if a result sounds funny to you, do not blame the tax preparer. Blame yourself, because you should be aware of it. If something seems off, you can't believe you owe, you can't believe you're getting this big refund. Well, guess what? Maybe it's not right. And it's not because you have a preparer that doesn't know what they're doing, most likely. What it means is your preparer didn't have all of the information. So if you're getting a big refund, it's like, well, did you report all of your other income? Because why are you getting a big refund when you never have had one? Or if you owe a bunch of tax, well, why do you owe a bunch of tax? There should be easy explanations, and the easiest explanation from there is comparing to the prior year tax return, right? So when you have a result, or whether you're checking your result, you go to one line item on your tax return, and it's going to be a different number line item no matter what year you look at, because they change every year. But guess what? There's a line item called total tax. Any year that you look at on a Form 1040, you're going to find a line item and it says total tax, and it is written in English. It's called total tax, T-O-T-A-L, second word tax. That's all it's going to say, and then there's going to be a line item on that. Compare that number to prior year. What was the total tax in the prior year? Why is it different? Well, you either made more, you made less, you had interest, you had dividends. That is the one key number. It's not about a refund, and it's not how much you owe. Your tax is really the most important number to be aware of, because if it's different from one year to the next, well, then it has to be because there was a shift up or down in your income or deductions. If you get a huge refund, it's because you paid in more tax than the tax was. That's it. A big refund doesn't mean your person's any good. And that's why I get angry when I see ads for these big box tax preparers that say, maximum refund guaranteed, and basically leaving the impression that they've done something. They've done nothing, especially these big boxes, okay? Nothing, except take your mail and enter it into a return. And in some ways, I think you're almost better off doing the return on your own through a software than using one of the big boxes. First of all, the big boxes rip you off. They steal from you, literally. It is a crime how much they charge. It is criminal. And then they come up with all different ways to charge you fees. Criminal. It is predatory, and I cannot believe the IRS stands for it. The ones that are a software typically now have people that you can inquire of. They ask you a ton of questions. That's why I don't like do it yourself, but for those that are going to insist, and that's why you're coming to YouTube, you just insist that you want to go ahead and stitch up the cut on your arm, which means you want to go ahead and file your own return. Okay. But I like the softwares better. I don't use them. Never have prepared a tax return on a software that any of you would be using other than those that are tax professionals, okay? But I've seen them. I've oversaw them in sense of watching somebody like, well, how's this work? And what I love is that it asks questions, and it asks questions, and it asks questions, and it asks questions. Sitting in front of somebody that got 2 days of training doesn't know what questions to even ask you. Now, those big boxes, yeah, maybe 1 out of 20 has great experience. Most of the time, if they have great experience, what they do, they set up their own shop because they realized they can help people better, probably charge less. So remember, that tax return is yours. Make sure it's right. Make sure it's complete. Ask questions and work with somebody that asks you questions. And if they didn't ask you questions, don't just put it on Facebook and say, oh, this person's no good. They didn't ask me any questions. Guess what? They're busy. They have lives. They might be in the middle of something. And it just didn't dawn on them that you wanted to go over a list of questions with them. Why? Because most accountants think you want to spend the least amount of money with them. That's what they think, unfortunately, right? Wrong. You want to spend a little extra time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, ask a few questions. Okay, and if they haven't asked you a question, just call them, get on the horn. Just say, hey, I had a few questions. What are the questions? Well, does it look like you got everything? Did you compare it to the prior year? Does it look like it's complete? You're not questioning them. You're helping them, and you can make that clear. If you're uncomfortable, just saying, hey, I understand that it's my return. I understand that you can only prepare it best of what I give you. So what can I do to help you? Do you feel like you have everything? Is there any questions we can go over? If you have someone that's rude, you have somebody that doesn't return your phone call, you have somebody that makes you feel like an idiot, well, then probably need to fire them. You need to go find somebody else, okay? Because that means actually they suck. They're a terrible, 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 worthless professional, okay? Just the same as if you were going to a dentist or anybody else, and if they made you feel dumb or they were rude and they never got back with you, they never got you an appointment, you'd fire them. Fire them. Fire them. Somebody that's going to spend time with you, ask you questions, follow up with you, give you explanations, right? Give them a few days to return a phone call. Should be within a week, right? Emails within a week, if not within a day or two, and follow up and follow up and follow up, okay? It's your tax return. Make sure it's right. All right, hey, thanks for tuning in. I'd love it if you'd subscribe. Check it out. We got a little blizzard going on here. And then don't you ever forget, you've never met a CPA quite like me. Subscribe.